Hello, this is the Artword Podcast and I'm Jenny Danielson. I will be talking to Michael Shaw in a bit. He's an artist and he's also the maker of the Conversation Art Podcast. It's been going since 2011. I met with Michael in LA and at that point we went to see a couple of shows together and then he interviewed me in his podcast and that is number 214 if you are interested. I will be talking to Michael about Made in LA, the biennial at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. Thanks for listening. I hope you will enjoy it. So, I wanted to talk about a specific show. A show I won't have time to see. It's at the Hammer Museum. It's an event that is every other year. It's called the Made in LA. And this year, I believe there are 32 artists on display, and they all from Los Angeles, but kind of the greater area around LA, right?
Correct.
And I've been reading that there is no overarching theme for this exhibition. Is that a good thing, or is it just a bit confusing?
That's an interesting question. I think themes are very fluid when it comes to biennial type exhibitions, you know. But you could easily see, you know, that they could improvise or adapt the work to fit into their theme in very liquid ways. So whether you have an organizing theme or not, you know, it's not going to matter that much in the scheme of things, I don't think.
Would you still say that there is a story being told? Like, can you feel why these 32 artists were chosen?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean,
how they're connected, yeah.
There's clearly a big intention on diversity. And yeah, I mean, I think that's if you boiled it down to one word, it would be diversity, you know, in terms of representation of the demographics of the city, right? That would be one way you could define it in terms of the people and the artists in the show. Another way you could do it is in terms of their work, which it tends to be very socially and or activistly, or if not politically. I hesitate to use the word politically, you know, because it's such a charged word and, you know, some people will push back and say, you know, if you make artwork because it's a political decision, right? But I mean, honestly, you know, in a vernacular sense, there's work that has concerns, you know, social concerns, if not political concerns. So that's a guiding theme or tendency of the work. And then you have, as you do pretty much, I think, with all of the Made in LA shows, I think this is the fourth one, you have, you know, a couple, at least one older artist, like much older artist, who's sort of historically being recognized.
Okay, yeah, because the age range from 29 to 97, but is it still that the majority of the artists are sort of mid-career in the 30s and 40s?
Yeah, no, I would say it's probably, I mean, I didn't take a close look, so, you know, maybe you know this better than me from having read more about it, but I'd say it's probably more 29 to 39, you know, or 29 to 38 even.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
yeah,
and then you have some outliers who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, and then this one artist, it's Lucida Hurtado, who is the 97-year-old.
Yes, yeah.
And notably, by the way, the works in this show, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just clicking on her page now, all older pieces, like vintage pieces.
I would imagine so. I mean, she's one of these female artists that just been discovered and there's so much work that's never been shown before. So I would imagine that they take the opportunity to show older work of hers.
Yeah, I make the point, you know, just for clarity's sake, but also, so I think most of these pieces were made, if not all of them were made in the 70s. And the reason that's noteworthy, if you think about older artists, is because, oh, geez, help me out. Who is the Cuban-born, I believe, artist who's lived in New York forever, who just turned 100 or 101 even recently, who's the painter? Do you remember her name?
Carmen,
right?
Something. Diaz is not. It's C something. It starts with C. I can't remember more. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Let me look it up because I don't want to. Yeah, it's Carmen Herrera.
Yes,
so
Carmen Herrera.
So she's making work, you know, now, you know, and it's been showing it now. So that's, I think, the distinction that I wanted to make, that, you know, I didn't read the didactic. I didn't really, just to be clear to you and the listeners, I don't think I barely read all text that went along. So I didn't read it for Lucida Hurtado. So I don't know what the story is in terms of why she's not making work or if she is making work currently. But, she could be making work and they're not showing it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think also it's just the decision of the curators. Also, I read somewhere that the show is designed to promote under-recognized artists from this area. Do you agree? I mean, do you know of all these artists beforehand, or are they new to you as well?
I think that's an important point that you bring up, because a lot of the artists I was not familiar with, even ones who have had some market success, as it turns out. But that maybe tells you more about how non up to speed I am. But yeah, of the 32 artists, I'll say that I had some familiarity with, give me a second here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's say a little less than half of the artists I had some name familiarity, in some cases more familiarity with. Like somebody like one of the more mature artists is a painter, primarily a painter named Linda Stark. She's shown in galleries in LA for decades, so you really, one who's lived in LA for a little bit should be familiar with her work. But then there are a number of names of artists who I've never heard of,
Did that surprise you?
I guess not. No, I'm not saying it surprised me. Let's put it this way. I think it surprised me more in the past, but now it doesn't surprise me, because it's just a reminder of how many artists there are out there in this city or in this greater metropolitan area that extends beyond the city of LA that, so many of us are just completely unaware of, right?
So did you get introduced to a new artist that you kind of want to learn more about, someone that you didn't know about beforehand?
Yeah. First off, before I get to sort of my big pick to answer that question, I'll mention a couple of vaguely interesting people.
Please do.
One is this painter, Eamon Giron, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who, then this was one of the interesting things in experiencing the show. He was given the Hammer lobby, and for those not familiar with the museum, it has a huge wall space. At its height, it's probably a good 20 feet high, and the length of it is a good, 40 feet. Plus then there's another individual wall that you face as you come down the stairway, which is also, another to plus feet high, and maybe let's call it 20 feet wide, something like that. And the reason that I was a little confused, first seeing it was it's abstraction. And, they have multiple shows going on at any given time during the non-Made in LA times of the museum. And one of the Hammer projects will be the lobby space. So part of me was thinking, is this just another Hammer project, that has nothing to do with Made in LA? But of course that would not make any sense, right? Because the whole museum during Made in LA is given over to Made in LA. So I finally came to my senses and realized that he was part of the show. And I think the abstraction is fine and good. It's one of the interesting inclusions, does not fit in with the more socially engaged / politically engaged tendencies of the work. Okay. Mm-hmm. And in relatively speaking to the rest of the show, it does feel oddly a little conservative. Although I'm sure, and I don't know if you've already read sure there's some greater political angle of some sort, or, social concerns. So MPA, just the letters MPA, is another artist that I was introduced to who, interestingly enough, when I spoke for my podcast with the curator, Denise Marconish, who curates for Mass MoCA in Massachusetts, she actually had just come from a few studio visits Inland Empire / desert region of just to the east of Los Angeles. And she mentioned a few of the names, only one of like 4 that I'd heard of. And one of them was this artist MPA, who I understand is a transgender artist. So when I saw MPA, I was like, oh, so that's MPA. And noteworthy about MPA is that the work really, particularly with the press that came out when the show launched, was really front and center. The pieces that MPA did are pretty spectacular. Part of it is about the fault lines of California, like the San Andreas Fault and whatnot, the earthquake fault line.
Yeah.
The piece includes, as you first go into one section of the museum, one of the sort of main entrances, you sort of see this green framed window on which the other side is one half of a pair of sort of cheap sunglasses, giant sized, 8 feet across or something like that. And they're laying on the floor as if they've just been split in half. And then, as you find out eventually, the other half of those sunglasses are actually mounted on an exterior wall of the museum, like 30 yards away, 20 meters away. Right. So it's a real encompassing piece where you've got, this whole installation inside, and then it continues on an exterior wall. And then I think it even continues again, like in this little area, this sort of little alcove of the museum on the second floor that's by where the phones are. Like you see these little threads that continue of that installation. And a couple things about it. One is that a number of people to fabricate the pieces, particularly like these giant sunglasses, one of whom is a surfboard maker that I'm familiar with, actually, called Anderson Surfboards. And then maybe three other fabricators, to put these things together, because it's not these sort of this very shiny fiberglass finish for the frames. It's also, the glasses themselves, the sort of reflective glasses themselves. So obviously a lot of fabrication planning went into that. So I was, I thought, oh, this looks pretty exciting, when I saw the photo of MPA and the piece in the Times, and then I went and saw it and I was intrigued. And honestly, as time has gone on and I've gone back to a few times, it's kind of worn thin for me a bit, like it's a bit of a stunt piece of sorts, And we'll see how much more critical I get throughout this conversation, because honestly, I'm wary of my degrees of criticality to the extent that people will hear this. Have you ever been critical? Have you been critical so far on your show of work and wondered, and
sorry?
On your podcast, been critical of work and had to think about what the ramifications of that would be?
No. I don't think I have, actually. So maybe I should. I just talk.
You're the constant diplomat, in other words.
Yeah, maybe I am, actually. Yeah. But I was thinking about this piece because it sounds like such a statement somehow. Giant, shiny. It sounds like the men from the 50s who were doing Johnny McCracken, those kind of people who were doing the cool school of the 1950s.
Yeah, it's part cool school. Part installation art and part, spectacle. Yeah. That's what you get in 2018. You get a little bit of cool school. You get a little bit of spectacle. Yeah. Let me ask you, have you had a chance to peruse the work just online, or did you feel like that wasn't?
Yeah, just a little bit, actually, but it's so difficult to see anything or to have a feel for it.
True.
I think.
Fair.
Also because the Hammer Museum is, I believe, a very nice art museum, and it's a big art museum. So if you say that the entire building is now made of this is a major show. This is a lot of work to take in.
It's a lot of work to take in. And I will say that here comes another critical point. So Hammer curators, be forewarned. It is given over to the whole museum, but because, you have certain artists taking up their own rooms in like the big gallery. And you remember this, Jenny, from when you saw the show when you were in town, sculpture based. I can't remember what it was called, but the picture for it were those socks, right? Do you remember the name of that show?
No, I don't, but I remember the show.
But remember the big gallery that had the balloons, at the top of the ceiling and whatnot? Yeah. So that space, which is one of the biggest sort of galleries throughout the museum, that was divided up into probably 10 different artists, when you stretch, not just that particular room, but that sort of section of the museum. So there were a lot of sort of subsections. And I found that it did not work to the advantage of those artists, I was just trying to say that the artists that were sort of crammed together, in that main section of the museum, that felt like a bit of a mishmash. They did not flow well into each other. So it was reminiscent of biennial type shows that you may have seen before where, you're going from one artist to another artist to another artist, back to back.